Hey, and welcome back once again to my channel. I'm Marty, and I'm here with Marcus again. You've probably seen him from another video from the 2A DIY compressor. So thanks for having me here.
Yeah, nice that you're finally here.
Yes, of course. And as you can see, this is not the usual spot that you see in my videos. This is a different studio. It's Marcus' studio. And you actually built it yourself.
Yes, it's all DIY like the 2A.
Yeah.
And yeah, it developed actually. We started to record my own band here in the other room. That's now the recording room.
So you have two rooms now.
Two rooms, recording room. It's the bigger one with like 20 square meters. And here's the control room. That's like 13 to 15 square meters. And yeah, I built that gradually actually. So the process was side by side with recording the first album of my band, Counter the Eulogy.
So you had a band and you thought, well, I need a studio.
Yes, of course, I did that.
So that's actually a good idea. The place looks fantastic. We are now in the control room here. And behind us is your DIY desk. You have touchscreen.
Yeah.
And I think you use Cubase. So we're going to have a little bit of look at that, of course, and also on the equipment.
Yeah.
And most importantly, the acoustic treatment, because you did a really great job as far as I can see here. You really made it soundproof, actually.
Yeah, I measured everything. So that's the key to me, to measure everything and see what the measurements say and not what the ears say. You know?
So I think the best thing to do is now I'm going to grab the camera and Marcus is going to show us a little bit around in his studio.
Yeah, have fun.
All right, so we are now here in the control room and I'm very interested now in the acoustics because you did everything yourself.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about what you actually did and how you did it.
Yeah. The main problem with these small rooms, I would say, is the bass frequencies. And in order to overcome that problem, I lowered the ceiling. In the middle, it's 35 centimeters lowered from the original ceiling, everything filled with rock wool. And on the sides, it's even 45 centimeters, so even 10 centimeters more. And that helps to capture the whole wave of a bass frequency because you've got no boundaries where the frequencies can surround an absorber. So you have a whole boundary of the room that's absorbing, and that actually helps a lot more in doing a dampening to the bass frequencies than it would if you only have, let's say, absorbers in the corners of the room.
The bass traps.
Bass traps, yeah.
Right. I've seen you also have a cloud here.
Yes.
Above the desk.
The cloud and these two absorbers are mainly for early reflections. So these three came last, actually, because in my thinking you have to tackle the bass frequencies first, and if the bass is all right, then you can do everything else. And the last thing would be to keep the early reflections at a minimum, and that's what the side absorbers and the cloud is doing. And
as far as diffusion goes, I've seen in the back here.
So the diffuser is a Viscoustics multifuser. That's a ready-made product. I already built a diffuser in the recording room, and that was actually a painful process, and it's really heavy. It's like 80 kilograms per part, and there are two of them. So I decided to not do it again here and instead buy a ready-made one. And it's actually working quite well.
But it looks very nice, actually.
Yeah. It's styrofoam, and it's lightweight. You can just put it there by gluing.
Okay, so let's talk now a little bit about the gear and the equipment. I've seen already that you use Cubase.
Yes.
And you have a really neat setup going on here because you have a touchscreen.
Yes. So the main goal for me was to have all my fingers do something when mixing. And since a console was, at least the consoles that I would like to have are way out of my budget. So I decided to try touchscreen. And in the first 2 years of trying that, actually, I tried it with Cubase itself.
Okay.
So the Cubase mixer, I can show you here if you want to. You've got the Cubase mixer here, and you actually got a very neat channel strip where you have EQ, compressor, gates, everything inside this virtual mixer. So that would be perfect for a touch screen. Unfortunately, Cubase is only single touch, which is a major drawback for me because you can only move one fader at a time, and there's no point in doing that if you get a touch screen. And the controls are quite small. So if you look at the EQ controls, for example, you have to be very careful to not dip 10 dB by 1 or something like that. So you can use it, but it's not the perfect way to do it.
Okay.
And then I came over a software that's called D-Touch from Devil Technologies, which is a software touch interface to Cubase. And that one is actually quite good.
Ah, all right.
So you have 10-point multi-touch, and you've got fine fader modes and everything like that.
Much more comfortable in using. And you also got an iPad here? Yes,
that's for shortcuts mainly. So I've got shortcuts for the different monitors, for the NS10s and the AMS to switch between them. And yeah, I've got shortcuts for everything that I do on a regular basis, actually.
Very nice, very nice. Well, let's go to the rack here. Maybe let's start off with the left one.
Yes.
The first one is a Art
Pro channel, yeah. That's my go-to bass compressor, actually. I don't use the EQ that much, and I also don't use the preamp that much. I'm just using the compressor. I switched the tubes in that one to NOS tubes from RFT. So it sounds much better to me, and I'm using it as an opto compressor on bass guitar most of the time.
Then we got an old friend here.
Yeah, the LA2A.
Showed in the video.
Yeah.
The DIY 2A. So if you're interested in that, we have a link in the description below for that video. It's a very neat and very nice built compressor from Marcus. So check that out. And then we got also the Stam 76.
Yes.
Which we have also video there. So just click on the link below and see yourself how it sounds. And then we got another Stam unit.
Yes, that's an SA4000. That's the SSL 4000 clone from Stam, the first generation. Now there is a second, I guess it's a second generation, where you've also got a sidechain to activate. And I don't know, there's more there that I can't remember. But yeah, an output transformer, actually, I guess. Yeah, they improved it a lot. But I ordered that, I don't know, 4 years ago. And as you know, with Stam, you have to wait a little, but it's actually worth it, in my opinion.
And then below it, an old guy, actually.
Yes,
Lake People.
That's a very rare compressor that's actually entitled a de-esser. And it's that way because it's similar to an 1176. It has very fast attack times, and that's why they entitled it de-esser, because you could actually de-ess with it. But it also has a compressor mode. So you've got the mode here, you've got the in mode, that's the normal compressor mode, and then you've got the de-esser if you flip it to the left side. And you can stereo link it. I'm never stereo linking my compressors, actually, because I don't like that.
So dual mono.
Dual mono, yes. I like the different behavior. It's not much, but it sounds a little bit different.
I think also CLA does that.
Yes, yeah. Most of the guys I know do that, yeah. And yeah, that one, I don't know, it's a very low serial number. I think it's something in the 1-digit range. These two.
Nice.
I got these from a guy in in the surroundings of Frankfurt in
Okay.
Germany. And yeah,
All right.
great for my taste. It's very good, and it's working on my parallel bus where most of the mix is going through. So very similar to the rear bus, for example.
Okay.
That's famous for Andrew Scheps.
Then let's move on to the converters here.
Yeah.
I think you have a Focusrite.
I've got an old Focusrite, yeah. It's a quite cheap unit, but it sounds, yeah, good. It's not perfect, but it sounds good to me. I'm starting to change the converters, actually.
Okay.
And I don't know at the moment, but I think I'm going to switch to the RMEs. That's also an old guy, the RD8DS. That's the 96 kilohertz. And I guess that's the second version now. You've got version 4. But it sounds very good to me. And it's also got the high gain mode that's where 0 VU is minus 19 dBFS. So there's plenty of headroom.
Okay, yeah, sounds good. And so how do you like the audience, the preamps?
The audience is wonderful.
Perfect.
I would say that's wonderful. Yeah,
Only good things from that.
Yeah, I'm using it a lot. And I'm also liking the modes here, the HMX and the iron mode, because you can really change how a microphone behaves if you're changing these two modes.
So I guess you use that for drum recordings?
Yeah, yeah. Mostly overheads. The first two channels are mainly on overheads. And yeah, the snare, bass drum, they fall on these, mostly the toms. And then what's left is probably going to the Focusrite, hi-hat. If I'm doing it, cymbals. If I'm really miking them separately, a crash or something like that. I'm not doing that often, but they would go to the Focusrite because these are not so important signals for me. Okay.
Then we got on the right side here some preamps for speakers, I guess, the Yamaha.
Yes, that's a power amp for the speakers. Yeah, that's the one for the NS10s. That would actually need a change of the fans because they're really loud. Oh. It's like 30 years old or so. So I should change those. And then I've got the Alesis RA500 that's switched to mono at the moment because it's only driving the one Aura clone that I built myself over there, where I'm checking mono signal. And sometimes I'm starting with that one and try to get the balance right on that single speaker, and then I'm switching to the mains.
All right.
Yeah.
And then maybe let's go to the first one, the Lexicon here, FX unit. I have the same.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not using it for mixing much. I'm using it for tracking mostly. So I'm having the comfort reverb for singers and delays for guitarists and stuff like that from that unit. Because then I can direct monitor from my RME. I've got a RADAT RME card in the PC, and then I can use the direct monitoring features and don't need Cubase for monitoring.
Well, I use it for mixing sometimes on the drums, snare drum. I think the delays and reverbs do sound quite nice.
Yeah.
And for the price, actually not that bad.
Yeah, it's a bargain. I think I bought it for 90 euros. You can't complain about that.
Okay.
Yeah.
And we got a very pumping.
Yes, that's the Lindell. That's on the kick and snare bus. So parallel bass to kick and snare, where I'm crushing those two. And looking for a lengthened decay of those two. So it's really doing like 20 dBs of gain reduction, and it's only mixed in like minus 30 dB to the whole mix. And yeah, and the 500 rack needs to be filled up, as you see.
A hole in a rack is
Yeah.
not good.
No, not looking nice, but budget is constraining me here. Yeah, and then there's a unit which I really like. I'm using that on my backing vocals and spatial bass, where some amount of the reverbs and delays are going to, and all the backing signals and everything that needs to be on the sides of a mix, because you've got the width knob here, and you can actually do a 150% stereo width directly on that unit.
Okay.
And it's sounding better to me than doing it with a plugin.
Oh, that's interesting.
And yeah, that one is from the designer of the original Joe Meek, Edward the Compressor. And he did, with his own company, he did that P38. I guess the Edward is called the P8. And then he, as a reminiscence, he did the P38. And it has 4 models. I'm mostly using the original, the 4 model is the Joe Meek, the Edward model, but it also has VCA, FET, and Opto models, which you can switch here. Yeah.
Right. Then let's go finally to the speakers. I think that's the last bit of equipment here.
Yeah. My trusty Ames Black TV, the 4th edition, if I'm correct. These are coaxial speakers. I'm really liking coaxial because you've got this point source, actually, where all the frequencies are coming from the same point of the speaker, and it gives a very nice stereo image and depth to the monitoring sound. Yeah.
And so how do you like the NS10s?
The NS10s, yeah, I like them. I think if guitars and vocals are sounding right on the NS10s, then they're sounding right everywhere. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And the mono speaker just for
leveling mainly, yeah, and mono checks. Okay. Because that's real mono. It's not just phantom mono where you would use 2 speakers and switch to mono on your controller, but it's real mono, and that's a difference. If the acoustic is not perfect to 1000%, I would say it's a difference. Yeah.
All right. And finally, also, don't forget the couch.
Yeah. Sorry. For the clients. As you see, you can comfortably sit here, probably a 4-piece band, and listen to how the mixes sound.
Well, then maybe we have another effects gear here, which are the guitar pedals.
Yes. I had a very big guitar board for 4 years or something like that, and I'm gotten bored of carrying it around, and my back was not really thanking me for that. So I decided I don't need the board anymore. And instead, I'm using some of the pedals for mixing sometimes. It's not something I'm doing quite often, but sometimes it's just right. A guitar delay, for example. The delay is now in the recording room because we needed it. We just recorded the last guide tracks for my band 3 hours ago, so I needed it over there. But I would mostly use the delay pedal because it sounds a little different than a plugin would sound. And from time to time, that's just right.
Okay. All right, so I would say we go now to the live recording room.
Yeah.
And check that out. All right, so now we are in the recording space. It's actually much bigger than the control room.
Yeah.
And let's start here with the piano, I can say, section.
Yeah. Yeah, I've got an Alexander Herrmann pianino, actually, here. That's, I can't remember, I guess it's 72 or something. Built in Eastern Germany, in the former Eastern Germany. And it's quite an unknown brand. Even the restorator of the pianos didn't know it before, so he looked it up in the opus and he found out it's 70, I guess it's 72. Okay. But it has a very a very resonating sound. It's got a heavy block inside, so it's not just some cheap one, but it's really sounding quite good.
And actually, we talked about that beforehand. The space where the piano sits actually is or was actually a control room before you built the recording space.
Yes, that was control room and recording room all in one, as you often have in smaller studios. And I would start tracking the band here, my own band, and having the control room table here and the computer sitting here. So that's also the reason why you've got those angled walls here, because it was really the control room space. And and the drummer would sit behind there. We will see that later and record. But the problem for me was that listening back to how it sounds on headphones is not the same as listening back on speakers.
I know that's the problem.
And so I decided to opt for a real control room.
Then you got also a old synthesizer?
Yeah, that's mostly for MIDI parts. And as a control keyboard, actually.
All right. Then another couch.
Of
course.
That's probably the first thing that will be thrown out if another amp or something is coming.
If you need more gear.
Yes, if I need more space. But it's comfortable for rehearsing or something like that.
All right, then let's talk a little bit about the guitar amps. So you really like the Hiwatt?
Yeah. As a big David Gilmour fan, I was drawn to Hiwatts early on. And I found one in the surroundings used. That's one from the early 70s. You can see it's a DR504, so the 50-watt version. And it only has the 2 inputs. The newer ones that are from the middle and late 70s would have 4 inputs, and the 100-watt version 2. But that one is older. And when I bought it, it actually had the original tubes inside. Power tubes and preamp tubes.
They were not blown out?
No, they were still working. And I played it for 1 year. And then the power tubes would start to suffer and then finally die. But I found a guy in the Czech Republic that's keeping a whole lot of old power tubes in his basement. And there are old RFT tubes inside that are older than the amp itself. The tubes are from 66 or something like that, and the amp is from the 70s. So it sounds great. And it's really important for me, because I found out I tried newer ones, JJ power tubes that are specially built for Hiwatts, but it's not the same as the old ones. Because I suppose they are not allowed to use the materials anymore that have been used back then, and you hear that. It hums quite a lot more, and it just doesn't sound that deep and 3D. But the last thing I want to mention about the Hiwatt, I really used that one for touring too. But I got away from that because it's too precious, and then I started to use the Laney. And
that's the live.
That's a live amp, for me. It's also quite nice. It has a very British tone to it, very aggressive. And the story about the Laney is that when I started my first band, I had a really crap amp. That was a Marlboro amp, like the cigarettes that you could buy. Never heard of that before and never heard of that after, and it really sounded like that, you know. And I was looking for another amp, and I came across the Laney VH100R, exactly that model, and bought it because it was quite cheap with a 410 cab. I think it was like 800 euros or so back in 2004. And then when we started to abandon the old band, and I really didn't have any need for the 100-watt amp anymore. I sold it, unfortunately, and I regretted that ever since. And when I came across another of the exact same model, I had to buy it, and so that's why that's here.
All right.
Yeah.
And the cap is the TT caps.
The cap is the TT caps, yes, that's with Eminence, the Tonker speakers that are 150 watts each.
Okay.
So they really are built for the high watt, actually, because the high watt needs very high wattage speakers. It's 300 watts cap for a 50-watt amp.
So it goes by the name.
Yeah,
High watt.
yeah, high watt, yeah.
All right. Then we got a bass.
We got the bass amp of our bassist, yeah. I can't really say much about that one, but apart from that, he likes it. And that's also a DIY cab that he bought with the amp. And yeah, it sounds nice.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. And on the other side, we got here a Marshall.
Yes, the Marshall 6100 from our lead guitarist with the JCM 900 cab. The cab, I don't want to lie to you, but he told me once he got it from a well-known guitarist. I think it was it the... No, I can't remember. I know that it was someone who is well-known in Austria and Germany, at least, from a well-known band, but I don't want to say the name now because I'm not quite sure. I'm not 100% sure. Yeah, but it has seen a lot of stages, actually. That's what I know. And it sounds great. Yeah.
And then you also got some live stuff here.
Yes, that's our live rack for the band. We're using in-ear monitoring, so we're having our own mixing desk, which is controlled from an iPad or from iPhones for different monitoring mixes for all of us.
You actually don't need the monitoring from
sound
guy itself.
Yeah.
So you make your own.
And most sound guys are quite happy about that because they can concentrate on the FOH sound.
Okay.
Yeah. And then there's just a headphone amp for studio recordings here that's fed from the control room over there, and every musician can turn the dials to his or her taste.
So I've seen you have some guitars on the wall here.
Yeah, mostly acoustics, as you can see. My main guitar is actually over there. That's the Stratocaster. You can see it over there. And here are the other ones. Sometimes I'm using the PRS. It's just an SE, but it's modded with other pickups. That's the Soap Bar 2, so it had Soap Bar pickups in it. And I wanted a guitar that sounds more like humbucker, so I switched the Soap Bars to humbuckers, DiMarzios. And yeah, I'm using that if I'm needing something heavier than the single coils from the Strat. Then here's my first guitar ever. That one I bought with my first own money back in, I don't know, 2000 or something like that. Yeah, and it's trusty. It's not sounding so good, but it's trusty.
And you got a 12-string?
Yeah, it's a 12-string. It's also a cheaper 12-string Baton Rouge. That's for occasional overdubs, if you need a 12-string sound. And that one here is the better one of those four. That's a Furch. That's also from the Czech Republic. It's a clone somehow of the old Martins, because back when the wall was still up, the people in the Soviet Union weren't allowed to use any of the US gear, you know. Right. It was prohibited. And so the guy that started the company later started to build guitars in his basement, having the Martins and Taylors as his models. And so he came up with these, and they are really, really great, sounding really great.
Looks very nice.
Yeah.
All right. And then we have a drum kit here.
Yes. That's the studio drum kit. A Pearl ELX with a very great sounding bass drum. At least here in that room, it's sounding very big and deep, and I like that for most of my records. It has a snare from a custom builder from Vienna. It's not my snare, it's the snare of our drummer. He went to the custom builder and specified how he would like to sound it, and he built it for him. And it's really sounding great, yeah, with a great snap. So that's the microphone collection, basically. Maybe let's start with the last Stam gear I have here. That's the clone of the U87 from Stam Audio, the SA87. And I'm using that exclusively on vocals and sometimes as a far microphone on the bass drum. Yeah, but it's really...
Have you already compared to Neumann?
No, I don't have. I haven't gotten hands on the Neumann yet, so I couldn't compare it. But what I can say is that I really like it from a sound point of view, because it's not harsh in the upper mids and highs. It's actually, if you hear it at first, it sounds a little bit dark compared to most modern microphones.
So it's modeled after the vintage one.
Yeah, with the Sauter output transformer, but you know, you can have it in the mix and then lift the highs a little bit, just 2 or 3 dB, and it opens up completely. And I found that's something that you can do with that one, but I couldn't do that with Chinese microphones mostly, because they're getting too harsh. Yeah. So that's a vocal microphone, actually. Then we've got the Rhodes NT5s here. Yes, but with other capsules. These capsules are from Michael Jolly from the US. Okay. That's cardioid, and they are modeled after the Sheps, and really sounding great compared to the Rode, which are again a bit harsh for me. And sometimes I'm using that for overheads a lot and for acoustic guitar. And sometimes I'm using the Omni capsules. These are the original Rode capsules. They are sounding good because, you know, Omni is more like a balanced sound, and that's great with them. Sometimes on overheads. Then, yeah, what else have we got? We've got the biodynamic tom microphones, the Opus 88 and 87, yeah, that are great tom microphones. You can just clip it on and use it like that. No need for a stand. Yeah. And they're sounding great for me. They've got a punch to them that I couldn't get with other microphones. I was looking for tom microphones for a long time, actually, and these are the first ones that I really like. Yeah, then we've got the dual diaphragm Audio-Technica, the ATM 250DE. I can open it up. It has 2 diaphragms, dynamic and condenser, and they are in perfect position to have the face really aligned. And there's a separate cable here where you can get both of them separately. So nice. That's great for bass drums for me.
I guess so. So you don't have to stick 2 microphones in front of the bass drum.
Yes, yeah. Then we've got the trusty Sennheiser E906 guitar amp microphone.
Very classic.
Yeah. Just hang it over the amp and everything's fine. Then I've got an ATM 450, which I like on hi-hats, because you can just put it there that way. It's side addressed, and it doesn't stick out to the front that much and annoys the drummer. So that's great. If you need a hi-hat mic, that is. And yeah, a cheap AT2031 that I'm sometimes using on the bottom of the snare drum. But more often I'm using the Sennheiser on the bottom and the Class C57 on the top. 57, yeah. And here's another Audio Technica. You see, I'm an Audio Technica fan actually, because they're really good microphones in my point of view. That's some microphone. It's very similar to the 57, but it doesn't sound so mid-rangey.
Okay.
It's a bit like it, but not that much. So sometimes we try that on snare drum too, or on the guitar cab, and it can work. So if someone of you is looking for another 57 that's not sounding so mid-rangey, you maybe try that one. It's not so, it's quite cheap. Yeah, and then we've got another DIY object. That's a Pronomic. That's the brand of a small music house, Kirchstein, in southern Germany. I guess it's the same as the Thomann own brands.
Okay.
That's a ribbon microphone, a small ribbon. And what I did to that one is, on the one hand, I removed the inner mesh so that you don't have that much reflections inside. Just took it apart, removed the mesh, looked after the ribbon if everything's right. And
it's not saggy.
Yeah, that's it. And then I also changed the output transformer to a Sauter one.
Oh, okay. Nice.
Because that really gives the sound some more depth. Yeah. And then we've got the C1000, the classy one.
I have that too.
Yeah. I'm not using that one much, but sometimes I'm using it for a mono room mic for the drums, or from time to time on the hi-hat.
I actually started out with that on the acoustic guitar.
Okay.
Did quite a good job, but I think there are better options.
Yeah.
At least with budget microphones nowadays.
Yeah, sure. But it still lingers here in case you need it. There's no point in selling it, because it's just like short below 100 euros. So right. I'll just keep it either.
All right, so that is now the diffuser
that
we've talked about in the control room.
The heavy one, yeah. I built it over there in the control room when it was still a workshop and not a control room. And then I struggled with getting it over there because it's over 80 kilos. Yeah, and I even more struggled with mounting it on the wall, because I had to have someone support it and then drill and get all the screws in. So that was quite a job, but it was fun building it. And I calculated the depths of the different sections here with a QRD calculator, which you can get on the internet. So if you're interested, maybe we can put a link to it in the description. And then you can just build it. And it's not as... It's not so hard to build it, actually, because there's only the frame and a back wall, of course, and then you've got styrofoam cut to the depth that you need the sections, and a wood that's just covering it so that you have reflective surface, because styrofoam would be not reflective enough. Yeah. And that one, I have to say, was actually built for the control room being here. So the distance that I calculated that diffuser is actually the distance that I was sitting over there where we talked earlier, where the desk was. Yeah. So it's not really effective for the drum set. It helps a bit with the flutter echoes, but it's not really that effective. It's calculated for more distance, a few meters.
You got also diffusion on the ceiling?
Yes, yeah. There are quite cheap diffusers from Thomann, actually, that I just glued to the ceiling as the last ingredient to the acoustics here, because I found it's helps a little bit with the echoes. Okay. I would only do that if everything else is perfect, but yeah, as the last step, really. One building block to the acoustics here are also these absorbers. you have here and on the other side of the room, and then the clouds, 2 clouds lowering, hanging from the ceiling. And inside of them is actually a woven polyester mattress, like the mattress that you've got in your bed. So, and
it does the job, I guess.
It does the job, and it is actually built for acoustic purposes. So it has an absorption coefficient that's quite even over the frequency range. It starts somewhere above 100 hertz, as far as I remember, but that's normal for that thickness. It's only 20 centimeters or something like that. And these guys started out as mobile gobos, actually. So they had feet and you could move them around. But then I found with the small space that I have here, I can always find a spot where the microphone can sit and where it sounds good. So I opted for mounting them on the wall in order to get them away from the floor.
All right, so that's once again it. I hope that you liked this tour of Marco's studio, Orthogonal Records. In the description below is of course his channel. If you have any questions, just leave them in the comments below. I guess Marcus will also try to answer them.
Yeah, I'll be happy to answer everything.
Right. So thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you for being here.
And please subscribe to his channel. And as always, see you in the next video and happy recording and mixing.
See you.